It looks like we have a good handful of people. Once again, if you haven't yet and you're coming in, be sure to put your name, where you're calling from in the chat, what group you're with, if that's the case. Um, but otherwise, I think we can get started. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can see us here. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Welcome. My name is Hannah. I am the Clean Water and Conservation Associate with Penn Environment Research and Policy Center. So thank you all again so much for joining us tonight. As you probably know, Penn Environment Research and Policy Center is a statewide nonprofit environmental group. We are part of the National Federation of State-Based Environmental Groups at the Environment America Research and Policy Center, whom you'll be hearing from tonight. I also want to thank Environment New Jersey Research and Policy Center's Clean Water Associate Luke Adams and Environment America Research and Policy Center's Clean Water Director John Rumpler for joining us tonight. You will be hearing from both of them in just a moment. And I also want to thank the William Penn Foundation for making the report we'll be covering tonight possible. So I'm really excited to be here with all of you tonight to discuss our recent report, Sewage Pollution in the Philadelphia-Camden Region, which shows how billions of gallons of untreated sewage and stormwater are polluting the Delaware, the Schuylkill and Cooper rivers, and the streams that feed into them, and also how we can stop that. So let me walk you through the agenda for the webinar quickly, and then we can get started. So we will start off by hearing from the Environment America Research and Policy Center's Clean Water Director, John Rumpler, who was one of the authors of the report we're highlighting on today's Zoom. John will present the report's findings and then show you our really cool interactive map showing the locations and the frequency of local sewage overflows along the Philadelphia and Camden sections of the Delaware River. After that, Environment New Jersey Research and Policy Center's Luke Adams will lay out the solutions to stop the sewage pollution in the New Jersey side of the river, and then I'll lay out our recommended solutions for the Philly side of the river. Then we will have plenty of time for Q&A at the end to get all of your clean water questions answered. During the presentation, feel free to write any questions that you may have in the chat or the Q&A box, and then we will get to them during the Q&A. To do this, you can click on the chat or the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen and type in your question. So now I would like to introduce Environment America Research and Policy Center's Clean Water Director, John Rumpler. John works hard every day to protect America's rivers, lakes, streams, and drinking water. His areas of expertise include lead and other toxic threats to drinking water, factory farms and agribusiness pollution, algal blooms, fracking, and the Federal Clean Water Act. So thank you again. And with that, I'll pass it to John to kick us off. Oh, John, we can't hear you. If you want to unmute.
Sorry, I tried to unmute and I think I remuted myself there. Sorry about that. Again, my name is John Rumpler, Clean Water Director with Environment America and Environment America Research and Policy Center. And so I have the privilege of working with all the folks at Penn Environment and Environment New Jersey, and indeed all of our advocates across the country. We have more than 30 state affiliates working on all kinds of threats to our rivers, lakes, and streams, and indeed our drinking water. And tonight I want to just dive into our most recent report on sewage pollution in the Philadelphia Camden region and walk through the data in our report and show you how to use and access that data. But I think before we dive into the numbers, let's take a step backwards, take a step back, if we will, and just our starting point here is that Philadelphia and the Camden area are blessed with amazing waterways. The Delaware River itself, the Schuylkill River, the many creeks, the Cooper River, and so forth and so on. These are wonderful waterways that are vital parts of our ecosystem, places where people should be able to enjoy recreation on and in the water, engaging in nature, and as part of our thriving communities. And indeed, with that spirit and that idea, that's why, in 1972, when Congress passed the Clean Water Act, one of the core goals of that bedrock legislation was to make all of our waterways safe for swimming. And I think we can say, swimming, but also other forms of recreation as well. And yet here we are. Oh, and I should say that goal was supposed to be achieved by 1983, according to the act. And yet here we are in 2025, and we still have billions of gallons of sewage flowing into these beautiful local waterways. Now, I should say Philadelphia and the region are not alone in this problem. There are many of our major metropolitan areas that have had problems like this. Some others still do. And we'll get into this a bit. It's not that no one has made any effort at making progress, but I think that what the numbers I'm going to show you tonight indicates quite strongly is that we have a long way to go and a lot more work to do before these waterways are as clean as we would want them to be, and as clean as the ecosystem and residents of the Philly and Camden communities deserve. So, with that, let me just share my screen and let's walk through the findings of our report. So this is the report, and Hannah, maybe you can put the link in the chat if people don't have it already. But what we did is we looked at the available data on both sides of the river from the Philadelphia Water Department, CCMUA on the New Jersey side, looked at the historic data of sewage overflows, both in the aggregate and at hundreds of actual specific places where this sewage pollution is released into our waterways. And we found that a staggering amount of pollution still exists despite more than a decade of some important efforts. So let's go to some of these top line numbers here. One of the most shocking numbers that we might see if we skip down a little bit into the report on the Philadelphia side is that there's an average of 12.7 billion gallons of combined sewer overflows flowing into Philadelphia's waterways. Now, let me just stop for a second to explain what a combined sewer overflow is. People are familiar with sewage, right? I mean, we flush our toilets, whatever, and we have sewage treatment plants that are ordinarily able to just manage that problem and protect public health. But every time it rains, there's a huge amount of storm water that also hits the ground and goes into stormwater tunnels. In a combined sewer system, that those stormwater pipes and those sewage pipes come together with the idea, it seemed like a good idea when these systems were originally built, that we would also want to treat that stormwater to make sure that harmful pollutants in that stormwater didn't flow into our rivers, lakes, and streams. However, what winds up happening is that all of these sewage treatment plants have a capacity of the amount of wastewater they can handle at any given time. And when we get heavy storms, or even not so heavy storms, that capacity can be overwhelmed, and sewage plant operators are basically compelled to release a certain amount of raw or partially treated sewage and stormwater into our local waterways. Otherwise, sewage is going to back up into people's basements. So it becomes a public health imperative. The lesser of two really bad choices is how we get combined sewer overflows. I should say that non-combined or so-called sanitary sewer systems can also leak and spill and overflow. and that stormwater runoff in and of itself is a major pollution problem. So, looking at the big picture, there's both combined sewer overflows, there's sanitary sewer overflows and leaks, and there's just plain runoff pollution where that stormwater hits our streets and pavements and parking lots and runs right off into a local creek before even entering the sewer system. All of those are problems if we care about water being clean. But we're just in this report looking at this rather gargantuan figure of these combined sewer overflows with the notion that, billions of gallons of raw or partially treated sewage is just clearly a unique problem from a public health and environmental perspective. So, again, in Philadelphia itself, 164 of these outlets, on average, when we looked at the data for a number of years, are dumping 12.7 billion gallons of this sewage into local waterways. One thing that was really startling when we looked at the data um, is that a number of outfalls are actually responsible for a very high percentage of the problem. Something like 10 of the outfalls contributed half of the volume of the pollution. So that's a serious concentration, and it gives us some suggestions about where we might start looking for solutions. However, I want to emphasize, and we'll get to this both on the Philadelphia side and the New Jersey side, that the volume of pollution, while shocking, is not the only way or even the most important way that local residents experience sewage pollution. And let's just be clear. Nobody wants to be swimming or kayaking or doing other water recreation in contact with poopy water, right? We know that sewage contains viruses, pathogens, parasites, things that can make us sick. We're talking about vomiting, nausea, diarrhea, ear infections, respiratory problems that have been associated with sewage pollution. In fact, public health experts estimate that across the US, there are an estimated 57 million instances of illness due to people swimming in contaminated US waters. So this is a serious problem. People can experience that problem in one of two ways. Either they go swimming in the water and they wind up getting sick, or they are deprived of that recreation. They were so looking forward to going swimming or kayaking on a local waterway, but then there's a heavy rain, there's a big sewage overflow, and they're just not able to access the water. And what I wanted to talk about was that secondary sense in which people experience this sewage problem, because what we were able to do is look at the data not just to show the volume of the sewage overflows, but also to look at the frequency. And what we found is that on average, when we looked at about a decade's worth of data, all the way up to 2024, which was the most recent year that we had data for this report, we found that on average, these sewage overflows were occurring 65 or more times in local waterways from Philadelphia. And you can see the numbers here if we break it down by particular watershed, whether it's Cobb's Creek, the Delaware River itself, Frankfort Creek, Pennypack, Schuylkill, or Tacony, that you can see the actual breakdown of the average number of combined sewer overflows in each of those sub-watersheds. Now, I should say that this impact gets magnified if we imagine there's 365 days a year. It's not just that there are 65 sewage overflows, but that the Philadelphia Water Department rightly warns people that the sewage, the public health impact from a sewer overflow, can last as long as 72 hours for each sewage overflow event. Now, obviously, we know these CSOs are not like perfectly timed, so there's a 3-day space between each one. But you know, you can imagine that these 65 on average or more CSOs may be depriving Philadelphia residents of recreation on their waterways for up to 195 days per year, well over half of the year, that's potentially unsafe for swimming along these beautiful waterways. And if we go to the other side of the river and we look at the data, I'm just going to scroll down to the New Jersey side. What we'll find is that even though the volume of sewage overflows in Camden County is dramatically less, it's still seriously high, but it's the hundreds of millions of gallons rather than literally 12.7 billion gallons. When it comes to the actual experience of residents, the sewage is flowing into these local waterways an average of 76 days per year. And so in terms of depriving local residents of this recreation opportunity, it is as much of a serious problem on the New Jersey side as it is in Philadelphia, even though the volume is dramatically less. So there's a challenge here that needs to be addressed. Now, having walked through the numbers, what I would like to do is just introduce you to the interactive map that our team of data wizards have created here so that you can actually dig in. I'm going to, of course, expand this so you can actually see the dots. But in addition to giving you the aggregate numbers, we wanted we wanted folks to be able to see on a local level, where are all of these sewage overflows? So if I care about the Schuylkill River, for example, I can zoom in on the map and I can click on any one of these outfall locations. This one, Market Street, west of Schuylkill Expressway. It's the CSO, or Combined Sewer Overflow outfall, identified by the Philly Water Department as S11. And it shows, you can see the annual volume of overflow. You can see the average annual frequency of overflows and the duration, and so forth. And then you can also go to any of these other dots and find the same kind of information about the volume and the frequency. And we have also put on the map, where we can, select key recreation locations. For example, this Fairmount Waterworks Trail and Boardwalk. We have Bartram's Gardens listed in another part of the map, right down here, as you can see, so that people can begin to understand the connection between these places where sewage is coming into the water and where residents currently would like to be recreating, or in fact are recreating on the water. And you can see that's true here on the Delaware main stem as well. And then when we go over to the New Jersey side of the map, you can see some of the similar data. Now, the one thing I will say is that unfortunately on the New Jersey side, the data is not available to indicate the average volume of combined sewer overflows for each of the discharges. So we only have frequency data on the New Jersey side. That's something I think we would all like to see improved so that the public has a greater understanding with greater real data. Kudos to the Philly Water Department for tracking both volume and frequency, so that we can see how serious a problem this is. We hope we can have that data on the New Jersey side in the future as well. And I'm just scrolling through the map so people can see that we've really mapped out all of the sewage overflows in the whole area. The only other point that I want to make about the data before handing it back over to my colleagues, well, Hannah, how am I doing on time here? Okay, is that we know that the Philly Water Department, and we know that CCMUA and the city of Camden have worked to make progress on this problem. They have tried, they have made some important efforts in that regard, and yet the problem dramatically persists. And I think it's really important to note that the problem is persisting despite these efforts, both because the magnitude of efforts need to be much greater, as you can see by the numbers, but also because if we scroll down here to figure two, we want to point out that the sewer overflow problem in many ways is a function of precipitation. If climate change over the next 20 or 30 years is going to be bringing heavier and heavier and more intense storms, that's going to mean a heavier and more intense burden on our sewage systems. And absent commensurate, more ambitious solutions to prevent the problem, it's likely to get worse, or we're likely to see the backsliding of any progress that has been made. And so you can see in this graph here with the 3-year averages of the volume of combined sewer overflows in Philadelphia that some progress was made, and you can see the volume starting to decline here, but then it's starting to tick up a little bit in the more recent years. And we think that's largely a function of precipitation, right? It's not that suddenly more sewage was added to the system, or green infrastructure that was invested in was then dug up and ruined or something like that. We think that this is likely attributable to precipitation increasing. Although there is, I guess, the possibility, we haven't really looked into it, that green infrastructure investments and projects that were made earlier on were not well maintained or something like that. We don't have any data about that one way or the other. I just want to pose it as a possible explanation for the trend we're seeing here. But the main point I'm just trying to make is that the issue of combined sewer overflows and precipitation is not static. It's a dynamic relationship that's going to require a dynamic investment and solutions over time. And I think those are the most important data points that, and here's just another data point, sorry, from the New Jersey side. We also had data from New Jersey about a subset of the pollution problem, which is solids and floatables in the river, which is kind of a gross, nasty thing when you think about it. Solids and floatables. There has been a dramatic decline in that part of the problem on the New Jersey side, and that's a really great thing. Solids and floatables are not the be all and end all of the public health problem, but they signify to the public that these waterways are gross. These are places that you would never want to go swimming or kayaking or otherwise get out on the water. And so we think they are an important thing to measure as progress, and we are seeing some progress there. So I did want to acknowledge that as well. In short, let me just close to say our point here is just we can and must do better. We can and must make our waterways safe for recreation for all residents in the area. And we look forward to working with all levels of government to make that happen. And with that, let me turn it over to my colleagues to talk a little bit more about solutions.
Awesome. Well, thank you, John. That was great. And next, I'd like to pass it to Luke Adams from Environment New Jersey Research and Policy Center to tell us more about, as John said, what steps must be taken to clean New Jersey's waterways. So I will pass it to you.
Alrighty. Hello, everybody. As you guys have heard, my name is Luke. I'm the Clean Water Associate with Environment New Jersey. And I just wanted to share my screen and kind of go over a few things here. I wanted to give just a little bit more color to what we're talking about when we're talking about the combined sewage overflow problem in New Jersey, specifically in the Camden area. And then also just kind of wanted to touch on why we should care about this problem, and then kind of go into, okay, what can we do about this? So if you see, this is kind of the Jersey centric part of the interactive map that John was just showing you all earlier. And so there's 30 outfalls on the Camden side of the river. And one thing I kind of really want to stress is, so the top line number in the report is that there are 76 days of overflows each year. But it's important to stress that's an average across these 30 different outfalls. There's some outfalls, like this one in River Road, that has 118 days of outfalls. And what's really important to note about that, I know John was just talking about how Philadelphia has more total volume, but the New Jersey Camden side has more total days of overflows, is because there's good data on 72 hours after an overflow, it could be unsafe to recreate on the water. So if you extrapolate that 76 days on average per year, that's 228 days per year where it is potentially unsafe to recreate in the water around it, which is really quite a shame, which we'll get into in a moment. But at this alpha location in particular, that's potentially over 300 days out of the year where it's just not safe to go anywhere near that out outfall. And why should we care? Because having fun on the river is should be available to everybody. This is a picture from Flowtopia. This is a great event that our partners over at Upstream Alliance put on every single year. Just get people who might not normally spend time on the Delaware River, might not normally be your main boating crowd, and just get them to spend time on the river. And as you can see, it's very casual. The Delaware currents are strong, so you just float on down and you kind of really get to take in the views and just spend a good day on the water. Other partners like Urban Promise have other great programs where they actually go and they take students through the process where they build canoes with them. And then those students then take their canoes out onto the water and spend more time. And it's a great educational and recreational opportunity for them. Other partners of ours, the Center for Aquatic Sciences, with the aquarium over in Camden, take folks out onto the water, and it's just and riverways as well, and really kind of highlight that not only is it possible, if we have clean water to get folks onto the river and recreate, but folks are actually doing this. This is a passion project for many people that we work with, and it's definitely worthwhile for those educational and recreational opportunities. But there's also another side of it, obviously, is the wildlife that we're harming by dumping raw sewage into our waterways as much as we are. So this is a photo of the Atlantic sturgeon, which is particularly impacted. It's native to the lower Delaware River, and it's particularly impacted because they're sensitive to oxygen depravity, which among with harmful algae outbreaks and exposure to toxic substances, oxygen depravity is really tough on these fish in particular. And it kind of just goes to show that not only is this, going to be useful for humans in dealing with the combined sewage overfill problem, but in order to be proper stewards of the environment around us, we need to take these guys into consideration as well. So that's just a little bit of why you guys should care about this. But to get into what we think needs to be done in order to get this problem solved. And I should note that this is Environment New Jersey, and we also had some great partners working with us as well, the Delaware River Keeper Network, Camden for Clean Air, and New Jersey Future. Were great partners, in helping us clean up the Delaware. But what we recommend is, as John was saying, Camden doesn't keep track of data in terms of the duration, volume, and frequency of combined sewage overflows. So a great first step would be to start tracking that. The Philadelphia Water Department does it. There's no reason Camden shouldn't be able to do it as well. The second thing we recommend is transferring the long-term control plan for sewage from the municipalities to the Camden County Municipal Authority to allow for streamlined action and more coherent resource usage at a regional level. And what resources are we talking about is we're talking about dramatically increasing the funding to CCMUA. And this is going to have to come from a variety of sources. We're talking federal, state, local governments all coming together. As well, we want to take a look at century bonds, which would allow CCMUA to lessen annual payments for over a longer period of time because these infrastructure improvements are going to last, 100 years, and would be a really solid way to reduce the annual cost of that, as well as the stormwater fee is another thing that we recommend looking into. And I just love this picture. I took this. Hannah was actually with me. We Upstream Alliance took us on a tour of the Delaware River. This was back in October, so it wasn't as cold. But I think it encapsulates a lot about what we're doing, what we're fighting for. I mean, like the sunset over the city of Philadelphia, you could kind of see a sliver of Camden, the Ben Franklin Bridge. It's just awesome. And I think this really kind of cuts to the heart of the point I'm trying to make is that there's so much that this waterway can offer, especially if you clean it up and make sure people can get out and experience it. And it, they adopt some of the proposals that we are asking them to. So that's it for me. I'm going to kick it on back to Hannah. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to me talk at you.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Luke. That was great. And yeah, now I can take a few minutes to talk about the policy handles that we are recommending in Pennsylvania to reduce the sewage pollution on the Philly side of the river. Let me move Luke's spotlight so you can see all of us. Yeah, so once I do that, we can then open it up for questions as well. So the first policy that we are calling for is for the Philadelphia Water Department, or PWD, to dramatically ramp up its investments, in the clean water infrastructure that is needed to rein in their combined sewage overflows. This also includes actions such as deploying netting or other devices that would capture these solids, as John mentioned, flowing from outfalls like Camden has done, and actually updating the data that's used in modeling. So we are accounting for the impacts of climate change. We know that cities from across the nation, from Portland, Oregon to Boston, Massachusetts, have been giving laser-like focus in investing their, own infrastructure to address their own sewage overflows, just like the ones we see in Philly, and are getting really great results in reducing their pollution. But PWD doesn't seem to be giving the same level of attention and investment to this issue, and that really does need to change. Secondly, we need Philly's suburbs to reduce and treat their sewage and stormwater runoff more as well. So, a number of suburban communities are allowed to send a combined total of as much as 128 million gallons of wastewater per day on average into the Philly sewage system. So these upstream communities need to take stronger action as well, including investing in improved infrastructure in their own sewer systems that connect to Philadelphia's, while also contributing more resources to end this regional pollution problem. And then also, we need greater attention to this problem at the state and also the federal level. So, this includes the federal government making much more significant investments in addressing sewage pollution in Pennsylvania and also across the country. And also for Pennsylvania state officials to increase funding for Philadelphia and communities across the state. Cities won't always have the resources to go at it alone, so state level and federal investments really are key. And then lastly, if we are going to promote more recreation along Philly's great rivers and our streams, we need city officials to implement common sense policies like creating new recreational access points along Philly's waterways for boating and paddling, swimming, fishing, floating, as Luke mentioned, while also lifting the blanket ban on swimming on our rivers and streams. So this would be really great for enjoying our incredible rivers and streams more, while also building the public's investment into tackling the pollution that is currently plaguing our waterways. If PWD and other officials could implement these recommendations, it would go a really long way towards reducing sewage pollution in our rivers and overall having a cleaner Delaware River. And if you want to help make these policies a reality, I am going to put a couple of links in the chat right now. I'll do it after I finish talking, where you can sign Penn Environment's petition to tackle pollution in the Delaware River, and then also a petition to increase funding to address sewage pollution here and across the country. So if you want to add your name to these petitions as we start the Q&A, that'd be awesome. And with that, I would like to open up the Q&A. So as I mentioned, you can type any questions that you have in the chat or in the Q&A section of the webinar, and we will answer them. And if your question is directed towards any one panelist, include that as well, and we will answer it. Yeah, thank you again. And with that,
Ooh,
let us know what questions you have.
and I have been answering a couple of questions as they've been occurring in the chat. Um,
Oh,
so
all
far,
good.
a couple of people asked, so been trying to do that as I can. Um, but I did, if I could, I just wanted to add a little bit of color to some of the things that you were alluding to. I think you had mentioned Portland, Oregon, and a few other cities. So just to put a finer point on it, Portland, Oregon, the sewage overflows into the Willamette River have been reduced by more than 90%. Washington, D.C. is on track to reduce its combined sewer overflows by more than 90% in sometime in the early 2030s. Boston, the figures are similar. So the job is not completely done in those places. There still are days when there are sewage overflows, and we'd like to see the job completed. I know local activists here in Boston, where I live, would like to see even more action taken, but dramatic and substantial progress from where the problem was decades ago. So I just wanted to underscore the magnitude of possibility for our communities here in the region. We really can do a lot more.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. Always good to get all the details from you. And as you were speaking, we actually got a few more questions in the chat, so I can read those out. So one question coming from Fred, it's a bit lengthy, so I'll read it out. It says, the CCMUA recently stated that some of the funding to fix the CSO problem in Camden and Glow City should come from all of the CCMUA ratepayers because whether you live in Cherry Hill, Haddonfield, and anywhere in the service area, you'll all benefit when sewage discharges in the Cooper, Newton, and Delaware stops. So, could we get an up-to-date of the effort to develop this sort of cost sharing among all rate players?
Yeah. So I think there is kind of hesitancy among just kind of the entire state of New Jersey to raise any kind of rates. But CCMUA is obviously very hesitant to raise rates, especially to do this. So that's why I think what we're really advocating for here is not putting it all on ratepayers, but trying to get the Delaware watershed to get more funding that matches other major watersheds on the East Coast. So it's not all going on to ratepayers. I agree that the ratepayers would be the ones that benefited the most, but at the same time, there's no reason for them to take on all the burden, and that's kind of why you need the more tiered, sources of funding.
Awesome. Thanks for answering that. Another question coming from Steve. He's asking, is the design for combined storm and sanitary sewers fairly common across America?
Um, it was. Older communities throughout the Northeast and the Midwest tend to have more of these combined sewer overflows. There are hundreds of these systems still across the country. Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm gonna turn to the Q&A. I see, Carol, your question, if we can get more wildlife groups involved, absolutely, that can be a great initiative to, bring into this effort. Obviously, birds are on the river, they're impacted by this. But moving to the Q&A, some questions that you have there. One is coming from Sharon. So she is asking federal funding issues. So how are Penn Environment and Environment America addressing these? The problem in which I was involved, flood mitigation for Eastwick, had completed initial investigation, but federal funding for the next phase was cut off.
Yeah, I'm really glad, Sharon, that you raised the question of federal funding because I want to say that we at Environment America and Penn Environment and Environment New Jersey, we're not just demanding local action and demanding that water utilities do more. We want to work shoulder to shoulder with you to get more resources from every level of government. And our national campaign, our national Safe for Swimming campaign, we have been working to build support for dramatically increasing funding to convince Congress to increase funding for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to more than double the amount that Congress is currently allocating on an annual basis. And I do have just one really exciting piece of progress as part of that effort that I would love to share with you. I think as we were indicating earlier, the people who really understand how serious this problem is are people who actually are wanting to recreate on our waterways. And in Philadelphia, I know there's the head of the Schuylkill. Up here in Boston, there's the head of the Charles. We also have triathletes and open water swimmers and other competitors. So we reached out to water athletes across the country and urged them to use their voice to tell Congress to dramatically increase funding for the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And just this week, Environment America, our separate 501(c)(4) organization, delivered a letter on behalf of more than 200 rowers, swimmers, and other water athletes, including members of Team USA, urging Congress to increase the Clean Water State Revolving Fund to $10 billion a year, which would be more than a doubling of that effort. If I can, I'm trying to see where I can put something in the chat, Hannah. Here it is. I'm just going to put the link to that letter in the chat. And I would say that this is an ongoing effort. If you noticed, there were a lot of water athletes from New Jersey that signed on to this letter. We look forward to seeing more water athletes from Pennsylvania signing on to this letter as we go forward. But it's pretty exciting. Take a look at the list, particularly for the Team USA members at the top of the letter of signers. If you feel like going to Instagram or Facebook and giving a shout out to these individual water athletes that are raising their voices for clean water, I think they all deserve some applause, taking some time out of their competitive, efforts as athletes to work with us to promote clean water. And again, hopefully work to get Philadelphia and Camden and other communities all across the country increased resources to tackle this problem.
Thank you for diving into that. So another question we have, the question is, at what point does the pollution in the river become toxic? And is there an efficient way to mitigate this? Naturally or oh, naturally it is better to prevent it. Yes, it's better to prevent it. How do we mitigate it?
Yeah. I'm going to take the word toxic broadly speaking, meaning threatening to public health. I think toxicity has a very more specific technical meaning. And certainly in sewage overflows and stormwater runoff, we're not just dealing with pathogens and viruses, but all kinds of other contaminants that are not cleaned out. And some of those can be heavy metals and toxic chemicals and so forth that get swept up in the waste stream. We didn't have any way of measuring those. But what we do know is that fecal indicator bacteria like E. coli, when those have been measured after sewage overflow events in the watershed, they have been above levels that pose risk to swimmers, that can make people sick, as I was indicating earlier. So we do know that there is a substantiated public health risk here that we really need to grapple with.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for answering that. Another question we have coming from John. He's asking, how will the recent EPA dissolved oxygen rule for between Philly and Camden and Wilmington affect the rate at which progress on this issue is made?
Too early to tell is the short answer to that question. I think we're going to need to be listening carefully and hearing what some really smart, creative engineers have to say about how we can make investments that both reduce the problem of low oxygen as well as reducing these sewage overflows. So we'll look forward to hearing more from technical experts that are beyond our purview. I'm just a lawyer, so I know that there are probably engineers who could answer this question a lot better than we could today here.
Yeah, thank you. Cool. So there are two more things in the Q&A. One is Ellen appreciating the framing of this issue as a national problem, not just a specific community one. It's definitely both. There's a lot community can do, but also obviously waterways are connected and funding doesn't just flow from the cities. So that, yeah, glad we could highlight that. And then one last question as a reminder, if anyone else has any questions before we get to that, feel free to put them in the Q&A section, put them in the chat. We are happy to answer them. But jumping into it, coming from Ellen, she is asking, if the funding is coming through the Clean Water Act State Revolving Fund, then that is debt financing, and that puts the cost burden on ratepayers in two communities that have high poverty rates. So is that, having that effect on those communities?
Well, that's true to a certain extent, but not exactly. So the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, states can use some of that money for loan forgiveness, not and so not just low interest loans. Um, so that's not entirely correct. But we're open to other ideas. So another possibility as the Clean Water State Revolving Fund comes up for reauthorization in Congress is to shift the percentage formula allowed to be used as grants rather than loans. So that's another thing we can do in addition to increasing the overall amount of dollars that are flowing out of Washington, D.C. But if people have other creative ideas for funding, we would love to hear them. I mean, the Century Bond idea was another idea that you heard us talk about a little bit earlier to extend these payments over the likely lifetime utility of some of these major infrastructure investments. That's the basic idea there. But at the end of the day, one way or another, we just think clean water is worth it. We think it's worth it to ratepayers. We think it's worth it to residents. We think it's worth it to federal taxpayers. We just believe that our nation should be investing in clean water.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, that looks like that is all of the questions. So thank you for asking those really great questions, and thank you all again so much for joining us tonight. If you have any other questions that come up, or if we missed a question in the chat somewhere, feel free to send me an email and we will get back to you answering that. Also, if anyone missed the beginning of the webinar, or if you want to share it with anyone else, the full recording will be available on, oh, John.
No, just finish up, and then I just wanted to make sure to add something at the end.
Okay, absolutely. But yeah, the recording will be on our website, so it'll be on Penn Environment's website, Environment New Jersey, and we'll get it on Environment America as well. And we'd also love for you to help get the word out about this issue by sharing the recording or the report, which I've put in the chat once again on your social media. But yeah, John, what else did you
I, I
want to
just
share?
I just wanted to make sure to acknowledge and thank the William Penn Foundation for making this report possible. It took a lot of work, a lot of hours, a lot of expertise. to look through these numbers and carefully think through how to responsibly present them in a way that the public could understand and give us a really full picture of this problem. So we just want to express our gratitude for that support that allowed us to produce this report.
Yes, thank you so much. And also, one more question actually popped in the chat.
Ah,
So, one more question to wrap up the night. Also, if you have more, you can still put them in. But this question is from Max. He is asking, how can organizations offering public recreation programs on and in the Delaware watershed raise awareness with participant and local communities that could lead to action on this issue?
I think there are two ways, in my view, but Luke, you may have thoughts, and Hannah, you may have thoughts as well. Um, One is I think that these local voices can authentically speak to the real demand that residents have for wanting to be out on the water and truly enjoy these beautiful creeks and rivers, whether that's through blogs or photographs or testimonials. We would love to hear all of that. I think that really reminds people that this is not just an abstract issue of some ancient law like the Clean Water Act, but it's actual real people and real people's lives, and the aspiration for the kind of city and neighborhood and community we want to live in. The second thing is that, to the extent that folks on the ground in any of these recreational and community organizations have actual experiences of people either not being able to get out on the water or people who have become sick because of sewage overflows or any of those kinds of anecdotes, they also help tell the story of why more action is urgent. So we would welcome and love to hear from and collaborate more with you.
Yes, absolutely. To build on that, if, as John said, if you're affected by these overflows, if you know someone, if you use the water, if you just like looking at it, let us know. We'd love to highlight your story and share it for others to hear. So feel free to send me an email, um, John, Luke, whatever it is. We'd love to share a story. Luke, did you have anything else to add on that?
No, I think you guys covered it. But yeah, like just the testimonials, that's super important and making it real.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Well, that looks like that is all of our questions. Once again, if anything else comes up, feel free to reach out and let us know. We're happy to answer it. But otherwise, that is it for our webinar. So thank you all again so much for coming, and I hope you have a great rest of your night. And bye.